Matthew chapter 20, verse 29. As Jesus and his disciples were leaving Jericho, a large crowd followed him. Two blind men were sitting by the roadside, and when they heard that Jesus was going by, they shouted, and when you read this, even as I read it out loud, I'm not giving it its due. I would shout this because they shouted it. Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us. The crowd rebuked them and told them to be quiet, but they shouted all the louder, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us. Listen, when when people know of their need, and when they know they're, how do I say this? When you know you're blind and Jesus comes along, you're going to find a way to get to Jesus. And the best they could do, they'd somehow heard that Jesus was on that street. And the best they could do is shout as loud as they could to get his attention or somebody's attention. The crowd that was with Jesus, this was very annoying to them. Shut up, they said. Verse 32, Jesus stopped and called them. I just think that little sentence, Jesus stopped and called them. Jesus may have been the most interruptible of all characters, individuals in the New Testament. This to me is, I don't like to be interrupted. And when I was in church ministry, I had stuff to do. I had some deadlines. I had people counting on me. And getting interrupted, I'm not good at stopping and starting. You know, if I get interrupted, then seems like it takes me double time to get started again. I don't like interruptions, and even today, I don't have a church ministry job. And I still don't like being interrupted. Apparently, that didn't bother Jesus. It's possible, I think, looking at Jesus' life, it's possible to have a divine mission and still be interruptible. So he was interrupted, and he called out to them, "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. He already knew. In some ways, this is one of Jesus', I think one of his coolest attributes is that he let people tell him what they needed. He could have he knew, because there's nothing he didn't know. Lord, they answered, we want our sight. I have tried to imagine what it would be like to be blind. Can't even imagine it. I had a very dear friend that was blinded by diabetic retinopathy. He was in ministry, and I don't know how he did it. I truly don't know how he did it. I spent time with him, and one of the biggest hindrances, was that he had no independence. Almost everything he had to have assistance with. I mean, he could take walks with his stick, and he could see enough to not fall into the ditch, but excuse me, he could not make out faces. He couldn't drive himself. He had in their house, he'd figured out a way to arrange things so that he could get around. But man, I just admired Gene. Well, his diabetic condition eventually took his life, but I witnessed a little bit, pardon me, of the challenges and difficulties of the blind. There were no societies for the blind. There was no assistance other than whatever your family and friends could provide in Jesus' day. Of course they wanted their sight. Jesus had compassion on them. Man, I need Jesus to be compassionate with me. I think it's interesting, and maybe the word I should say is noteworthy, that Matthew includes the fact that Jesus had compassion and touched their eyes. Immediately they received their sight and followed him. John Newton wrote Amazing Grace. The words, the text, I once was blind, but now I see. Well, there's a lot of ways to be blind. I have been blind, not physically, but emotionally. I've been blind spiritually, intellectually. One of the difficulties for me is that this blindness, those kinds of blindness, are, nobody did that to me. I did it to myself. Okay. I don't want to over-apply this, but there's something here for us, first of all. These guys knew they were blind, right? There are a lot of times I didn't know it until later. I looked back and realized, oh, that was a blind spot. Everybody has blind spots. Everybody, except Jesus, okay? It takes humility and actually coupled with desperation most of the time for us to discover our blind spots and call out for help, which is what these two guys did. They called out. They went out on a limb. They took a risk. I'm not good with risk. I'm getting worse as I get older. There's always a risk. Faith requires risk. Trust requires risk. Now, some of the risk is mitigated by our experience with the faithfulness of God, but there is still this risk. And for these two guys, they didn't have any assurance that Jesus would hear them and stop for them, but he did. Maybe the central application for this, for me, and maybe for you, is I got to take the risk and call out to him. I have to admit my need and call out to him and take the risk. What if he doesn't come through for me? What if this doesn't work? What if? Well, I can invent hundreds of what ifs. For these two guys, the what ifs were irrelevant because their need and their trust exceeded the level of what if for them. Boy, I want that to be true of me. Well, okay. Immediately, Jesus touched their eyes, and immediately they received their sight and followed him. Now, can you imagine? Even if I'd been only blind only for, a week and got my sight back, I wouldn't just go, oh, hey, that's very nice. Thank you so much. This was a truly life-altering moment. Okay. And then they followed him. We don't know anything else about him. I really don't. I have a feeling, though, that they probably told their story a lot. Is that part of the application? That maybe I should tell my story a lot? Chapter 21, as they approached Jerusalem, remember that was their destination, and came to Bethphage on the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, go to the village ahead of you, and at once you will find a donkey tied there with her colt by her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, tell him that the Lord needs them, and he'll send them right away. Okay, put yourself in the place of these 2 unnamed disciples. So, I grew up in Oklahoma, and in the Wild West, horse thieves were hung. I think that'd be the same thing in Jesus' day with donkey stealers. Donkey thieves they were not well liked or well cared for. And so, if I'm one of these 2 disciples, I'm going, I don't, so we just go and take? Well, no, okay, if anybody asks you, here's what you tell them. The Lord needs them, and he'll send, and the person will send the donkeys with you right away. Oh, really? To me, it's kind of this particular narrative, the faith of the disciples kind of gets obscured by the majesty of the event, which I'll talk about pretty extensively next time. But this time, I'm going to close early and apologize for how this has not been my best. But I look at these 2 narratives, 2 different events, and realize the theme that connects them both is trust and faith. How I need more of both. The scary part for me is I get faith by experiencing stuff that I can't take care of or fix. I have to trust him to do that. I don't like that, but that's just how it works. All right, let's get this over with, and I'll try to do better next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.